As we said, you're a former central banker. You're also, though, part of the political establishment in Nigeria. You haven't actually run for political office before. Do you really think you stand a chance at winning?
Yes, indeed. I stand a very good chance because I think we're at a historical moment in Nigeria where Nigeria's citizens have come to realize that the old, established and recycled politicians have done them no real favors. We've been at democracy now since 1999 and the country has just gotten poorer. Unemployment is high, population is rising, and so the trajectory needs to be broken, not by the usual politicians, but by a technocratic politician, which is what I think I am, someone with a vision and technocratic knowledge about how to manage the economy and wage a war against poverty. That's the central theme of my presidency, WAP.
The economy, of course, key, growing very slowly, and as you sort of suggested there, hasn't really recovered from the 2014 oil price crash.
No.
Will it improve if Muhammadu Buhari gets another term?
I think it will get worse.
Right.
To
what extent?
I think it will get worse, you know, for the very reason that there's a fundamental level of incompetence in the Muhammadu Buhari presidential administration, and politics trumps everything for them. So rational economic thinking is a bit scarce. And so when you process everything from the perspective of populist economics, then the hopes for Nigeria's economy are not very high if Buhari comes back for a second term.
Does that mean then that if you don't win, you would prefer a win for the main opposition, People's Democratic Party?
Well, we can't. I mean, I plan to win. That's the point. You know, we'll cross whatever bridges when we get there. But I'm in this race to win, and the message that I'm putting out to the people of Nigeria is increasingly being accepted. I've toured over 20 states of the 36 states, and I'm still at it. People tell me that they want something different, something new, something bold, and they think I represent that.
So you've been putting your message across to the people. What about investors? What have you been hearing from investors while you've been in London?
That's part of why I'm in London, to actually meet with investors and to tell them that there's hope in the horizon. I will be meeting with investors today at the Official Monetary and Financial Institutions Forum, OMFIF, of which I'm a member of the board since I left the central bank. And so we're going to be talking about the economy and investment prospects. Nigeria is a huge market, and all it needs is the right type of political leadership for its, huge potential to be realized.
Speaking of investors, we have one with us on set, Nick Wall from Old Mutual, and I know he has a question for you.
Sure, Nick.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, I guess over the previous elections, we've seen some pressure on the local currency, and we've seen some devaluations in the last few years. So I just wonder whether you think, what you think of the current FX kind of floating peg regime, and whether it'd be more beneficial for Nigeria to move towards more of a floating FX rate. A free FX rate.
I believe it will, but for that to happen, they have to put in place the fundamental structural economic thinking. Right now, we have multiple exchange rates in Nigeria, so there is even no transparency in the FX regime, which has been one of my concerns and the concerns of many other investors. So, we will have to move to a floating regime, but I suspect that the central bank will not do that at this time for political reasons.
So just to be clear, because you mentioned the multiple rates there as well, would it be better to have a single rate?
I think so. I think it would be better to have a single rate through price discovery in the marketplace. That's what I've always advocated for. But the problem is that the central bank at this point has not been acting completely independently. And there's a political concern of the Buhari regime to keep the price of the dollar fixed so that the country can continue to import at a very subsidized rate. So you're subsidizing the foreign exchange market essentially because the central bank keeps pumping dollars into the market. I think the Naira should find its true value. And in finding its true value, Nigeria can develop an export competitive economy that, helps its economic transformation much more realistically.
Yeah, it's interesting that you've brought up central bank independence, because this is a big theme that's come up just generally when we talk about emerging markets. One of the reasons that investors are concerned about some other countries like Turkey, for example. When you look at Nigeria and you think about how investors look at it, is it at risk of sort of falling under the umbrella of general concern around emerging markets?
Yes, I think it is, but I think it's a transitional phase. I think Nigeria has much more rational, right-thinking political leaders such as myself who, as we struggle to come to office, that risk will recede.
So if we continue to see pressure on emerging markets, I mean, the last couple of weeks, we've actually seen a little bit of a rebound, some more inflows going into EM. But if EM assets come under pressure again, are you worried about Nigeria, or are Nigeria's problems self-inflicted, as it were?
Nigeria's problems are largely self-inflicted, although you cannot take it out of the general EM space. But Nigeria's problems are largely politically induced. They come from incompetent and visionless political leadership. That's the real problem Nigeria is having. It's not a lack of sound economic thinking, but when you operate under the authority of politicians who have different agendas, then you have a problem. And that's why I've chosen to go into the political arena instead of serving as a technocrat, because you don't achieve really what you can when you're under politicians who don't share your vision.
Nick, are there any countries on the African continent that you sort of would go towards in terms of investment or stay away from?
I mean, it depends a lot on our view on oil a lot of the time. So we have been long the oil producers like Nigeria and like Ghana at different times. I guess with Nigeria, they've because they've been conscious of outflows because growth has been disappointing recently. They have kept local rates very high to encourage us keep those portfolios flows there. So I mean, we do have limited exposure in the local rates as well.
I also just want to ask you, finally, Kingsley, basically what you think of the central bank's handling of its allegations that the South African wireless operator, MTN, illegally transferred $8 billion out of the country.
Well, it's always difficult to comment on regulatory issues because I'm not in the central bank anymore and I don't have the full facts. But if they sanctioned MTN, there must have been a reason why they sanctioned MTN. Now, the challenge is this. A lot of companies are not able to manage their regulatory risk. And this is something that a lot of multinationals should pay much closer attention to. Now, it's no good when you don't manage your regulatory risks, and when the central bank or the regulator hits you, you begin to complain about the larger economic consequences of your possible economic collapse. So it becomes a problem because the central bank, of course, does not want, companies like that to fold up. But at the same time, you don't want them to be just, have a free hand and do whatever they like. Companies must manage their regulatory risks. And I hope that that's the lesson that comes out of this experience.